Hi, Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute, 7everyminute.com, coming to you again from the field. So things are a little rough tonight. Plus, also the topic is, as you're going to find out, is related to the hour of publication. Things went a little differently than expected. But glad to have you here tonight. Remember, this is the podcast that's all about reimagining your life, and sometimes that means doing things differently than we had first planned on. So, um, probably one of the biggest topics and the biggest topic of tonight is just recognizing the commonplace things that happen in our lives. Um, it, it's something that we tend to overlook a lot. So we're going to talk a little bit into that about that and how it really plays into our everyday life and ways it can make our life just more satisfying and happy without really trying to put a lot of effort into it. Because when you recognize the little things, you just find out things are better than you often thought. So if you like what you hear tonight, please leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and hope you come back and visit us some more. So talking about again, so recognizing the commonplace. I notice there's an echo where I am right now. I apologize for that. Basically, what we're talking about is mindfulness, and really it comes down to really being mindful and recognizing what we do have, rather than going around in this state of envy about things that we don't have. So I'm in an area right now where things like cell service, which is why the time of the podcast is a little different than initially planned. But things like cell service, it's kind of a bit of a luxury in many parts of this area. And it strikes me every time I travel somewhere else, how many things we have, just how many things we have in the US that we really take for granted that in other parts of the world are either less common or sometimes just very uncommon. And when they break, it's not kind of like, it's not a disaster. It's just, they expect it to break part of the time and it does. So right now, in the area I'm in, cell service sometimes gets pretty flaky, particularly if you travel right outside the main city areas. And it's interesting because my phone, it's a Google Pixel. My phone, and I've noticed this about Google things a lot. Google tends to kind of assume that you live in this perfect world. You have a lot of bandwidth, you have constant connectivity, all the things that work really well if you live like in Silicon Valley, say, for instance, but don't work so well like if you live in the Midwest of the US or in other countries. And things like my phone right now, if I travel around and use GPS, use the Google Maps, it has a real hard time very often because Google Maps actually usually is triangulating not off the GPS satellites in the sky, which is where it gets a lot of its information from, but it's always double checking itself off the cell phone towers because they give it positional information too. And my poor phone, happened a couple of days ago, went for a ride, and the ride was about 4 hours long, and probably for about 3 hours of it had no cell service at all, pure period zero zippo. And the map kept going on by going, I'm not sure about the location accuracy, could be here, could be there. And it's interesting that the design is based around assuming we have this very perfect world. Wonderful, but it doesn't always happen. And then you think about where we are up in the US, and be going around almost any metropolitan area or actually almost any area in the US. And if you don't have really good functionality in your cell phone, you're just a me. You're annoyed. How can this not be working? And that's not something that's true in much of the world. And it just kind of ties into a lot of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Another thing where I am right now is that cash is king by and far. Absolutely, it's a cash transactional society in most things except for major transactions. And so carrying plastic is really just about worthless in the majority of stores. And I'm not talking about very often on little tiny sidewalk stands or something, it's not accepted. And here, in the US, for example, now you see even street vendors are taking credit cards, and it's very rare that you can't pay with the credit card. Here, it's really unusual if you can pay with the credit card. And so, again, it's something we just take for granted on every day. And much of the world doesn't have it. I know, like in India, there's a couple different payment services tied to cell phones and things like that. But again, there's large areas where that just isn't the commonality. And so the real theme here is that we tend to get annoyed about things that other people just can't even fathom. They can't imagine. And because of that, we often go around and kind of, as I often say, people laugh, with our cranky pants on. about stuff other people would consider just a total freaking miracle that it ever happens at all. And to us, if it doesn't happen with 100% reliability, we're annoyed. How can that happen? I live in the best country in the world. How can we not have perfect cell service? Yes, we're in the middle of a hurricane. Yes, we just had a big snowfall, but the cell company should have thought about that. And maybe if you change your attitude a little bit, or maybe even a lot, you would find yourself in a little better mood much of the time. Another thing is, much of the country where I am, I've mentioned Mexico, um, not in this podcast, but in the previous podcast. Um, Much of the country is either underbanked or unbanked, and I've talked about this before. In the U.S., there's a large part of the population, it's not just the immigrants, but a large part of the population is either underbanked, where they use minimal banking services. Maybe they have a very small checking account where they keep essentially no money in the checking account, but they can go cash through paycheck there and pay their bills, but they usually don't pay them with checks, or completely unbanked, where they have no bank account whatsoever. And so you think about all the things where I work for what's considered it's probably edging on a medium-sized company at this point. But there, all our paychecks are electronic, and there's no option about that. I mean, you have to get paid electronically, and yet there's a large part of the population that can't get paid electronically. They don't have a bank account, and there's a huge part of the demographic that just can't use internet effectively. I mean, maybe they have internet on their phone and they use some simple things for it, but things like paying bills or scheduling a doctor's appointment. I was scheduling some doctor's appointments a couple of days ago, and realized I was just mulling through it as I was listening to the recording and stuff. Nowhere was there a switch other than possibly dialing over operator where you could actually schedule an appointment. So, to schedule your appointment, you press this, and you immediately put into something where you're expected to be able to just schedule right there using your cell phone or on a computer to do it. And there's a fair amount of people that have neither a smartphone or a computer, but our society has moved on beyond that, and we consider that just kind of something we really don't worry about. That part of the reality we just kind of ignore and go on beyond it. And again, it's recognizing all the little things we have, all the things that are truly amazing, actually, but not everybody has access to, and certainly not everyone in the world is close to having access to it. And so, how do we learn to kind of appreciate the mundane things and all the little commonplace things we find in our life? Well, the answer is obviously it's mindfulness, and basically, and you can't pay attention to every single thing in life, right? We've talked about that before. You have to do things semi-automatically often. But there are times, even when you're doing something semi-automatically, where it pays to just step back for a second, think about the last thing that you did and how amazing that really was. You were running late and you run up to, you pick up your phone in the parking lot and you place an order for the counter, and you run into the counter and you say, I'm number 26. And they, hello, 26. And you swipe your card and off you go. That whole thing is actually totally amazing, because I have to have a technical background, but if you don't, that data has gone through numerous different computer systems, numerous different networks. The data has been handed off between applications. All sorts of magic happen in the background, and we just take it for granted or get furious if it didn't work. This amazing thing that includes, probably hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment, certainly hundreds of $1 million of infrastructure. If it didn't work perfectly, we're enraged. How about if you said, every time it works, that's amazing. You just saved 5 minutes off of my day. That's 5 minutes to do something else I want or I like or I need to do. That's amazing. So, instead of being enraged every time you lose cell phone service, how about you appreciate it for the 95 or 98 or 99% of the time is pretty solid, right? Instead of, criticizing companies that, do things that, one of the ones that I get now, of course, one of the big things is that we're going to decarbonize the whole world. And, spoken like people who truly live a privileged life, but that's another whole large podcast. But instead of criticizing the companies that bring us all the fuel all the time, I'm not saying they're angels, they're not. But we've enjoyed for decades gas prices, and the rest of the world just can't believe how cheap our gas is. And are there some places less expensive? Yeah, there are probably some. But you go to other places, most other countries, gas is far more expensive. Fuel oil is far more expensive. Diesel's far more expensive. Everything's far more expensive. And having this low cost energy source has allowed us to live just a level of lifestyle and with a level of freedom that is just unheard of in most other countries. And when someone does something wrong, you're going around, this is kind of a different topic, but somebody does something wrong and they cut you off in traffic, or they were just not thinking, they did something and they turn out, geez, I'm really sorry that I don't know what I was thinking. I still hear today, these days, it's everything so just wrapped, everybody's so enraged about everything that even when somebody apologizes, they still, really go up and down and tell them how stupid they were and everything else. Kind of like, instead of telling how stupid they were, how about you step back for a second and say, hey, yeah, no, I have those days too. Sorry, but I'm glad everything worked out okay. We didn't have an accident. Life's good. Have a good day. Whatever happened to being tolerant and just getting along with other people and realizing you make mistakes, they make mistakes. Mistakes just happen. It doesn't mean somebody was doing you wrong every time. Just have a little grace, have a little mercy, and maybe make the world a little bit better place, one little comment at a time. And there's another whole thing when you, and this one, it's a touchy subject, and I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but when national policies and politics don't go the way exactly how you wanted, remember that our constitutional republic, remember that's what it is. It's a constitutional republic. It's not a democracy, never has been, hopefully never will be. It's based upon respecting the rights not only of the winners, but the losers. And this has gotten lost in the last bunch of elections. Kind of like we won, we got 50.06% of the thing. Now we can do anything we want, and we're going to force everybody to do it our way. That's exactly why our country was set up the way it was. That's not the way it's supposed to work. You should be tolerant when you win. You should be tolerant when you lose. Doesn't mean that you're still fighting for the things that you want to go your way, to try to make the point through civil discourse, civil discussion, as we talked about before. But it's not winner take all. That's not the way our country's set up. And that's not true in a lot of the world. Right? You only look around the world just this year, actually the past this year, there were a lot of elections. And you'll see the democracies in every country, and even things that are close to democracies, they've also, a lot of them have started to drift seriously towards both totalitarianism and socialism. And maybe it's time to really start appreciating the many, many safeguards that our country does have in the politics and the policies that we just kind of take for granted. And some of them are kind of slipping away, even in nearby countries, such as free elections and respecting the outcome of election. That's just happened in 2 countries recently within the past 3 months, where people have clearly lost, and the existing leaders just said, yeah, well, tough. And they go around, they round up, and they imprison the losers. Right? We have safeguards against that. And even such simple things like I mentioned before, I'm from New York, and New York has a really robust set of laws regarding how small communities have to run, provide access to the public to how the community runs. And so meetings can't be scheduled at inconvenient times, and people have to have access to them. There have to be announcements for that. All those things allow us to be involved in our government. That's not commonplace in many areas. And we overlook, we've become so used to that, we overlook something that's just unheard of in most parts of the world, quite frankly, where you go in, you see the town supervisor, and say, I want to see the town supervisor. Well, he's not busy or she's not busy right now, but you can talk to the secretary, and the secretary writes all the notes, and the town supervisor calls you back. There are so many places where that's just completely different than, and there's no sort of access like that, not commonly, but at all. And it's about time we start respecting some of those things and being amazed at all the things that we have. And again, many of us have lived our whole life with it, and we forget that it's something that most part of the world just doesn't enjoy. And back to the small things, just living in a society that values honesty and courtesy and the spirit of helping your neighbor, that's not true in a lot of places. I know people that and there are places in the US where this is changing, and I'm not ignoring that at all. but a good friend of mine ran into a Starbucks. This was like the total time out of car is probably less than 3 minutes because he was just going in to pick up something that had already been ordered. Should have been a quick transaction. Walked in, came out, his car had been broken into, and all his stuff had been taken. And this was in, of course, I say of course, this was in California where crime wave is certainly going well, but most of the country is not like that. And we can make it back to the way where if somebody said, hey, I stole this stuff, the people to go, that's cool. So they go, that's really bad. What are you doing that for? Right? It starts at the little things and it moves up. But we forget that. And we take that for granted. And when you take it for granted, it slips away. And once it slips away, it's very hard to regain. And so we have a ton of things around here. Just when you become mindful of all that we have, and it's not only just how fortunate we are to have them, but it really leads us, hopefully, to start thinking about when we think about all the things as a society and as a culture that we have, that we share, you realize that, and I've talked about this before, but I'm going to say it again, we truly have much more in common than we do in difference. And it's time for people to start saying that out loud. And when somebody starts ranting and raving, saying how, oh, these people, and they do some label, or those people, and they do some other label, say, no, it's not these people and those people. It's us. It's all of us. We have so much in common. We have so much that's so much better than the rest of the world. It's time to start appreciating it. And like I say, it starts with the little things. It can be a little thing like sitting there and you just want a coffee and you realize you're out of coffee and you can go down to a store safely. You forgot to bring your any cash, pay with a credit card, and it's just accepted. You can get your coffee. Those are all wonderful things that just aren't true in much of the world. And it's high time we start acknowledging those, respecting those, and appreciating those. And when you do that, something funny really happens. You're happy because things are really going pretty good. And instead of being annoyed that you had to run out and get the thing and I had to go down, you forgot your wallet, you could easily come up with a list of a dozen things to be annoyed about, or you could come up with a dozen things that really are wonderful. And that decision is yours. And I would encourage you, start recognizing all the little things, start being mindful of all the wonderful things that are around you, start being mindful that we really do have more in common than a difference, and start appreciating that, respecting yourself, respecting others. And if you start doing those things, I think what you'll find is that happiness isn't quite as elusive as people make it out to be. So that's it for the evening. Thank you so much. Little homework, actually, if you want to do it, pick a few things that happen to you just in the course of your day, think about them and you don't have to dwell on, just think, what did I do when I left the house? Oh, I went down, realized I was out of gas, so I went and got gas. And that got me to the station a little early because it didn't, there wasn't a line at the gas station. So I had enough time at the station that I picked up a coffee at the thing and I had some extra change. So I was able to give it to the guy who I see there, who I know is in hard times, and just go through your day of those things and pick 3 or 4 of them and think about them and think how each one is actually a really pretty fortunate and an amazing thing to have happened. That, you were able to get gas, you were able to get coffee, you were able to have some extra change, you were able to catch a train, the whole thing happened safely. Those are all just an amazingly wonderful set of circumstances that not everybody enjoys. And so even something as simple as making a cell phone and say, I'm trying something new, I'm trying to be happy. And the first thing I want to be happy about is I can pick up the cell phone and call you. Right? There's so many things that happen in our lives. Each one of them is amazing. So, that's it. Probably the most important thing, I guess, that I really want to make the point of, because every time I travel, like I say, it always comes back to me, is that life truly is good. And where we live in the United States is not just good, it's just amazingly awesome. And it's high time we start recognizing that and respecting that. So thank you for listening. Thanks for everything. you like what you hear tonight, please leave a like, hit subscribe. If you have any questions or anything, drop me a note. And then, as always, there's a lot of wars going on right now, as we always talk about. And so ukr7.com and wck.org, two places. ukr7.com is stuff related to the war in Ukraine. There's wars obviously also in the Mideast, in Africa, and unrest in many, many places. World Central Kitchen, wck.org. World Central Kitchen works wherever there's a disaster, do amazing things. Check them out. As we always talk about, one of the best ways to care for yourself is to care for others. Because it changes your perspective from looking inside and often, in a negative fashion or things that aren't well, to looking outside at all the amazing things that are around us and all the amazing ways in which we can make the world a little bit better. So again, try and take a look around you. Could be something you can make a donation. Great. If you can't make a donation, also great. Just a little word of kindness can change somebody's life in amazing ways. As always, thank you very much again for stopping by. Try and live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everyone. See you next week in 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you.